Hey there, everybody. Welcome to today's Let's Play of Higurashi When They Cry. We are in the Himatsubushi chapter. This should be episode 5, I believe. So in our last chapter, we got to play some mahjong with Ooishi and a couple of his buddies, including the dam construction project leader, who I believe ends up getting murdered later, according to our Hinamizawa knowledge. And we learned that, like, Akasaka was a bit of a mahjong prodigy. Kind of a weird chapter, because it was very, like, I don't know, a lot of the chapter was spent playing mahjong and like, learning about some of Akasaka's past, and it was, like, a little bit more of a playful chapter. So now we're jumping back into it. Let's see what happens today. I had a restless night's sleep. I did nothing but turn over repeatedly during a night that seemed like it lasted for eternity. Even then, I eventually fell asleep at some point, not realizing how high in the sky the sun had risen. I shook off the urge to go back to sleep. Then I noticed the phone was ringing. The time was almost 10:30 in the morning. Clearly too late for a wake-up call.
Akasaka-san desu ka? Ohayou gozaimasu. Ooishi desu.
Waking up to the sound of Ooishi's voice was a little too much of a shock. My delicate ears were ringing. Thanks to that shock, I was suddenly wide awake.
どうも。おはようございます。
ひょっとして今お目覚めですか？出張中とはいえ勤務時間には起きないといけませんよ。
まったくです。以後、気をつけます。
あなたの眠気をもう一つ覚ましてあげられるかもしれない話があります。Hinamizawa駐在所から届いた遺失物に興味深いものが混じっていたんです。
Okay. I got a little scared for a minute because the beginning of the last chapter we woke up and we also woke up to a phone call. I thought maybe like I had forgotten to save, but I think we're good because this is new information. So there was something interesting mixed in with the lost and found at the Hinamizawa police box.
遺失物。
詳しい話はこちらにいらっしゃってからにしましょう。
Okay, now we're back to the sinister. We did the playful with the mahjong.
お昼前に来れますか？
Now we're back to the sinister stuff.
いえ、すぐに伺います。
Ooishi already knew what my mission was. Since Ooishi said it was something that would wake me up, hard to believe that would be irrelevant to me. Honestly speaking, judging by the information from Sato-san yesterday, knowing that my cover was already blown, I couldn't wander to and from Hinamizawa carelessly. So our informant was also present at the big family meeting that they had in Hinamizawa the day prior. So everyone in Hinamizawa knows who Akasaka is. They know that he's investigating the townspeople, and I believe they also know that he's investigating the kidnapping. So, like, everyone's been pretending that he's just some bumbling tourist, when in actuality, everybody in town, including Rika, knows exactly who he is. In other words, my investigation was at an impasse. There was some information that put me back on the trail. That'd be nothing less than a stroke of good fortune. After vigorously washing my face, pulled on my jacket and hailed a taxi, heading towards the Okuniya police station.
おお、来た来た。天才ジャンシ様の到着だ。
I actually, okay, so to the subscriber, and again, I apologize, I'm so terrible with names in my memory. To the subscriber that suggested the PS3 sprite graphics, I actually do like these a little bit more, because now we can see them talking, they look a little bit cleaner.
遅くなって申し訳ありません。
So I like the original sprites too, but let's stick with the PS3, the console sprites for a while, because they look pretty nice.
一体何が出たんですか？
With absolutely no intention of reminiscing about last night's mahjong game, I pressed him to get to the point. Ooishi, anticipating that I would act that way, cut to the chase without any resistance.
先ほども申し上げましたが、今朝Hinamizawaの駐在所から遺失物が届きました。
Lost items that were turned over to the police were sent to Okuniya Station after the paperwork was filled out. Ooishi pulled out a plastic bag from a drawer and laid its labeled contents on the desk.
財布ですか？
A wallet.
でしょうな。中には小銭はあってもお札はなかったもんなんで、スリが中身を抜いた後に捨ててったのかななんて思ったんですがね、最初は。
Didn't understand how this wallet, so far removed from Tokyo, could possibly be related to the kidnapping. If it had drawn Ooishi's attention, it would have to be something dramatic, like if the wallet belonged to the missing grandchild. That would be absurd. Like something that convenient would happen. If that was it, then there were probably initials written on the wallet. Like the initials of Toshiki Inugai, the minister's grandson, T.I. Thinking like that at this point, I didn't suppose that this wallet was something that could get Ooishi so excited. Ooishi, after putting on a pair of disposable plastic gloves, handed me a pair of the same. I didn't feel that this wallet was such an important thing, so I had my doubts about whether there was any point in putting gloves on. However, I didn't want Ooishi's intentions to go to waste, so I put them on. Ooishi opened up the plastic bag and pulled it out, showing me the back. As I had imagined, there were initials engraved there. Oh, but it was slightly more detailed than what I had thought, with Toshiki I marked on it. So this is the missing wallet of the grandson. So, I wonder why Hinamizawa police would turn it over to Okinomiya if it was a missing wallet. Like, we are assuming that most everyone in Hinamizawa is in on it, unless, like, the Hinamizawa Police Prefecture is not. Maybe they aren't in on all the kidnappings and the detailings of it. Maybe they're a separate entity, I don't know. Ooishi grinned at me with a look in the face and said, "See? We can't confirm from that this belongs to the minister's grandson," I informed him calmly. This wallet was irrelevant. It was nothing more than Ooishi's overeagerness. First of all, there was absolutely no way, in this distant locale, that the missing grandson's wallet would be found with such convenient timing. Yeah, that just seems odd. After all, the Onegafuchi Defense Alliance wasn't related to the case in the first place. So there was no way this wallet belonged to the grandson. Why I wanted to decide that was the case, even I didn't really know. Even though what should have been a top-secret case was leaked before I had even been dispatched. In this situation, how could I say this was definitely unrelated? Would it be more prudent to pay more attention to this wallet? It had only been a couple of days since I arrived in Hinamizawa. But in those couple of days, due to the number of remarkable events, my nerves might have become just a little frayed. Shaking my head slightly, I cleared off of unnecessary thoughts. Ooishi opened the wallet zipper, revealing the contents. Inside was a small change and a number of crumpled receipts. Ooishi, from that jumble, pulled out a folded card. A holofoil Charizard! Oh shit! Seeing that, my heart stopped for a moment. It was a card from a dental examination. The name Toshiki Inogai and the age. It to me seems a little bit strange that this wallet came from Hinamizawa when we know that everybody in there is, like, super tight. Perfect match. Like, are we being set up? The dentist's location was in Tokyo. There's no need to explain any further. How far was it from Tokyo to Hinamizawa? It's far enough that taking the bullet trains and cars would still take several hours. Why would a wallet with a dental examination card from Tokyo show up in Hinamizawa? Could it belong to a tourist who came from Tokyo? Or maybe a villager on vacation in Tokyo just happened to pay a visit to the dentist? No, it had to have fallen into somebody's bag by accident. In my mind, I definitely struggled to find a possible excuse as to why this wallet didn't belong to Toshiki Inogai. It was as if it just wouldn't do it for this wallet to belong to him. However, weeding out any possibility for error one by one, the haze surrounding the wallet in front of me faded, gradually letting it come into clear focus.
Ne?
I felt a shiver of electricity run up my spine. My pulse quickened, and a thin film of sweat began to coat my entire body. From Ooishi's point of view, I was probably slack-jawed and spaced out, with a slovenly look on my face.
この鹿には問い合わせましたか？
そりゃ赤坂さんの仕事でしょ。私はまだそこまでは。
この財布はいつ頃のものでしょうね。
拾ったのは村人です。昨日のことだそうで。
じゃなくて、この財布はいつ頃落ちたものでしょうね。
ここいらに雨があったのはちょうど先週7日前。中身が水にやられた様子はないから、最長で6日前からでしょうね。
この財布の存在は署内で誰が知ってます？
初期対応のhinami沢駐在所の警官、それから遺失物対応で係が 2,3 人、あとは私とあなた。内緒の事件と関係があったらまずいでしょ。ベラベラとは喋ってないつもりですよ。
電話を借りていいですか？
どうぞどうぞ。
Okay, so maybe the lost and found is turned into the Okinomiya police. Maybe there's no police precinct to speak of in Hinamizawa. They kind of police themselves. Okinomiya Police Prefecture probably covers a broader area. So the Hinamizawa villagers brought the wallet to Okunomiya police station as a lost and found item. But still, why would they do
ゼロ
that?
発信から
Dialed the phone number inscribed on the examination card. I could hear my pulse pounding inside my head. Could there possibly be something so absurd? The addresses on the receipts and cards inside the wallet were all from around the area where the grandson lived. Name on the examination card was also a match. Time we deduced that the wallet had been left behind also matched up with the timeline of the kidnapping. Of course, it was possible I could just laugh it all off as a big pile of coincidences. Wasn't any strong evidence. Rather than all this circumstantial proof, the contents of the phone call I was about to make would have a much greater meaning.
はい、お待たせしました。中川歯科です。
どうも。こちらは沖宮署です。実は、お財布の落とし物がありまして、ご協力をいただいてもよろしいでしょうか。お財布の中に、そちら様の診察カードが入っておりまして、氏名は、犬飼俊樹くんです。カードの番号を申し上げますので、電話番号をお調べいただいてもよろしいでしょうか。ありがとう。お願いできますか。
Still holding the receiver, I pulled out a notebook from my breast pocket with my free hand. Open up to the page with the grandson's address and phone number recorded on it.
どうもすみません。はい。お願いします。
It's gonna be a match. Compared the phone number written in my notebook to the one that was being read out on the other end of the line. During that process, I spun around to look behind me uneasily. I locked eyes with Ooishi. Ooishi looked puzzled, wondering what the matter was. Why would I feel uneasy and look behind me? Because the person on the end of the line was reading out the numbers as though doing so straight from my notebook. Well, no duh. We knew that. And the HQ was in quite an uproar thanks to my report. No matter how many times the authenticity of the evidence I had linked to the grandson was called into question, I can only respond that it was the truth. So the only thing I can think of as to why the Hinamizawa villagers would turn in the wallet, remember the tip we saw at the end of our last episode. Mion's grandmother, the head of the Shinozaki clan, Oreo, was talking about how, like, enough was enough. We need to, like, there should be no harm that comes to this little kidnapped boy. Like, we got our message across. Now he needs to go back home. So maybe they returned the wallet to the police prefecture to let them know, like, hey, you guys are on the right track. This little boy is here somewhere in our village. Like, go find him. That's the only thing I can think of. I don't know why else they would give them the wallet willingly. The investigator first picked up the phone. I was grilled about the evidence that I'd found that was almost too good to be true, if I do say so myself. But after having doubt after doubt dispelled, he fell into silence. The receiver was finally handed over to the section chief. When he picked it up, the background thrum on the other end of the line disappeared, and I knew that it had gone completely silent. After asking the same questions about the wallet that the lead investigator did, Chief quietly spoke his next words.
わかりました。こちらから何人か増援を送ります。今日の夕方には到着できるでしょう。赤坂君は引き続き現地調査をお願いします。財布が発見された地域の情報を収集しててください。加納さんは何人か選んで現地へ直接。
The fact that he was sending Kano, the lead investigator here, meant that the chief had decided there was a possibility that the Inugafuchi Defense Alliance were somehow implicit in the kidnapping. I mean, didn't we know that, though? We knew about the meeting that they all held in town about the potential kidnapping. However, it felt as though that until the lead investigator, whom he trusted, had verified the evidence with his own eyes, he was still going to be skeptical about it. But very intense music.
どうでした？
本庁から増援が出発するそうです。私は現地調査を命じられました。財布の落ちていた場所は
高津戸のあたりだそうです。ここが沖宮。ずーっと行ってここがひなみ沢で、さらに上流にぐーっと上がっていくとこの辺が高津戸です。
Ooishi explained that where the wallet was found by pointing to locations on the map on the wall. This place called Takatsuro was even more remote than Himazawa was.
高津戸界隈はほとんど民家なんかありませんよ。昔の廃村です。無人の家屋が点在するなんとも寂しいあたりですね。
大石さん、高津戸へ案内してもらうことはできますか？
So maybe this is where they're holding the kid. They need to find a remote place to hold him, right?
構いません。赤坂さんお一人では なかなか自由にひなみ沢に出入りはできないでしょうからね。無論また野球帽とマスクをしてもらうことになりますが。
That Ooishi had agreed to accompany me was very reassuring. If Sato-san's info was to be believed, my cover had been blown. I wasn't sure if the villagers had realized that the fresh meat dispatched from public safety was the tourist that had visited the village yesterday. In other words, me. But deciding that they hadn't noticed would have been overly optimistic. They know it's us. Given a cursory thought, Takatsuro, where the wallet was found, couldn't be ruled out as a hiding spot for the kidnappers. The Takatsuro, I'm sorry if I'm butchering this, Takatsuro area didn't have any residential buildings, nor was it alongside a highway. There wasn't a reason for even the locals to go out of their way to visit it. It was exactly what you would call a long-forgotten ghost town at the end of the road. You couldn't ask for a better place to hold a kidnapped grandson. Also, you couldn't get to Takatsuro without passing through Hinamizawa first. Those several conditions made the area all the more important. Couldn't brush it off any longer. There was no longer any doubt that Onigafushi Defense Alliance, or somebody hired by them, were involved in the kidnapping. If that was the case, the fact that this wallet was found might have been already leaked to them. They even knew so much as to how the public safety division was operating. The case of the wallet couldn't be something they didn't know. In that case, there was a possibility that the enemy was lying in wait. To dive alone into enemy territory, surrounded by enemy territory, to say the least, required an amount of courage, nay recklessness, that I just did not have.
大石さんの同行がなければそうおいそれと踏み込めない村でしたのでご協力いただけて正直なところまたお金を要求されるのではと思ってました
Yeah, Ooishi is kind of a scumbag. I was kind of expecting him to ask for a favor too.
それは正直を言えばひなみ沢なんか好き好んできたがないですからね。運賃でも弾んでもらいたい気分ですが、でも一緒にタコを囲んだ友人の頼みとあれば。
Oh, you are very close to me. Ooishi grinned as he pounded me on the back. It struck me that he didn't want to just jump ship rather than have any sort of any sense of duty towards his job. Even so, it didn't really matter. Right now, I really appreciated the gesture.
では早速出し
I
てもらえます
appreciate
か
the gesture. Take like 3 steps back. Thank you. Then we knew that the police had obtained the wallet, and they would probably have moved the hostage to a different place. There wasn't a moment to lose. But Ooishi, without regard to the fact that we were about to head out, began to remove his jacket.
何をしてるんですか
まあ用心ですよ。
Ooh, he's got the concerned eyebrows.
家中の栗を拾うなら相応の用意が必要と思いましてね。あなたも来ます。
Oh, we're strapping up? Oh, a stab-proof vest. She pulled from the drawer below the desk was a stab-proof vest. And a gun? No. His name was Toshiki Inogai, grandson of the Minister of Construction Inogai. There's only one reason for him being here. If it didn't include gym or art class, his grades were above average. That was a result of having private tutoring lessons twice a week. If you omitted the fact that he still couldn't do pull-ups, there wasn't much else that would make him hate school. Same. I'm like over 30 and I've never been able to do pull-ups. I just have like spaghetti noodle arms. Don't feel bad, Toshiki. Don't feel bad. Don't let them ever tell you anything different. Of course, he understood full well that his grandfather was a cabinet minister, but he also knew that not too many people were that interested in their relationship. He didn't like to go out of his way to bring up his grandfather to call him the Minister of Construction. And finally, he at least tried to get to know a little bit more about what kind of work the Minister of Construction did than your average Joe. What that entailed was that when you tried your best to make life better for the masses, sometimes you made a few enemies. He knew that all too well from the time he'd spent as class representative. His grandfather had many enemies. He knew that he might personally catch some of that fallout, so he had to be twice as cautious. He was taught that by his parents. That's why, the moment he was kidnapped, he instantly knew that this was one of those occasions. He understood that he wasn't being treated as Toshiki Inogai, the person, but rather as Toshiki Inogai, the grandson of the Minister of Construction. That he wasn't personally at fault, but that this was a result of some unavoidable trouble with his grandfather's work. It made little difference, but when he realized it wasn't because of anything he did, he was able to relax, if only a little. Of course, at first, he was struck with a terror befitting his age, wondering what was going to happen to him. But after a while of being tied up and only able to stay lying down, he began to ponder a great many things. First, he thought about the reason he was being abducted like this. He understood the answer to that easily. He was taken hostage to coerce his grandfather, the minister. There was no doubt about that. He didn't know exactly what the Minister of Construction did, but it was easy to imagine that there was much to be gained from threatening him. He respected his grandfather more than most. He earnestly believed that his own grandfather was within the top 20 of the most important people in Japan. That was exactly why he wouldn't forgive anyone who tried to threaten his beloved grandfather. More importantly, he wouldn't forgive anybody who would use him as a tool to threaten his grandfather. Grandfather was really busy and rarely had time to meet with relatives. That's why, with the little time he did manage to scrape together, he just dropped by unannounced. And as an apology for not being able to meet during the New Year's or summer vacation, he doted on his grandson very, very much. The number of times that Toshiki was looked upon with disregard just because his grandfather was a politician and a minister certainly weren't few. But he never thought even once that he wanted his grandfather to quit being a politician. Because it was his beloved grandfather. He wanted him to continue his career as long as possible from the bottom of his heart. However, Toshiki was now being held hostage and his grandfather was being threatened. His grandfather, who called him the apple of his eye, was surely suffering. He might do anything to save his grandson. Maybe even putting aside his ideology as it was required to save his grandson. He might cave into the culprit's demands if it meant saving his grandson. When Toshiki thought about that, an inexplicable anger welled up within him. In his current situation, he was unable to forgive the cowards who would make his beloved grandfather suffer by using such dastardly means. That feeling swelled up inside of him, displacing the fear. What he thought of first was something any boy would imagine. Get out of these bonds, beat up the bad guys, then hand them over to the police. Toshiki saves the day single-handedly. Probably not. Images of all the brave heroes from all the manga he had read passed through the back of his mind. In his imaginary scenario, he slipped his bonds easily, floating like a butterfly to evade his captors, then stinging like a bee to bring them all down. In the end, it was nothing more than his silly little fantasy. But with his vision obstructed and unable to see anything, it was something he could get into more than any anime at the moment. In actuality, he was enjoying these little scenarios in his head for the long period of time he was tied up. His captors hadn't really done anything to him that they would feel sorry for. However, eventually, he began to grow tired of his fantasies, and more realistic scenarios began to run through his head. It was then he realized that none of them were a solution. Yes, he wanted to do something for his grandfather who was being threatened. That he was being held here to inflict pain on his grandfather was the thing that he could least forgive, and also the most vexing. And then he noticed. There was a much simpler way he could save his grandfather without having to beat up his despicable captors. That was to remove himself as a hostage from the hands of these villains. If he was to disappear from here, his captors would have nothing to threaten his grandfather with. Captors had restrained them, but they didn't treat him roughly, and they made sure he was fed well enough. Meaning at most, he was nothing more than the means for their threat. They weren't looking to bully or kill him out of spite. If he behaved, no ill would befall him. Realizing that gave him a strong sense of courage. And carrying his chain of thought this far, let it run its course to its natural conclusion. Oh, I thought we were going to be like, Toshiki Inogai is going to try and kill himself. That was where I was going with this. Right now at this moment, Toshiki Inogai had decided to escape. That's a much better solution. His ears had been stuffed with the sponge-like material, acting as makeshift earplugs. However, they didn't actually do much to block out any sound, and he could overhear everything his captors were saying. Realizing that was just to his advantage, even when his captors spoke to him, he acted like he couldn't hear them due to the earplugs. His captors, thinking that he couldn't hear their conversation, talked about all sorts of things without any reservations. Thanks to that, he was able to obtain various pieces of information. First off, this wasn't Tokyo. It seemed that this was quite a distance away, and on top of that, in the countryside, nestled deep in the mountains. It also seemed that his captors were inconvenienced living out here, so he could deduce that this place was far removed from any sort of town. Finally, whenever they went out to buy food or other supplies, they would always take a car. That fact caused him some dismay, because he knew that the method that he learned at school of running around blindly while shouting for help wouldn't work here. He paused his little mental escape scenario there. His ultimate goal was to find somebody who would help him. If somebody who fit that description wasn't close by, his chances of escaping successfully grew slim. A desolate, far-off land deep in the mountains. A place where you couldn't even go shopping without using a car. In this situation, escaping would be very difficult. He grew depressed, and after a little while, he returned to his original scenario. Imagining becoming a hero like this in the manga he read and beating down his captors became his respite. However, as he played those delusions out in his head, his heart, hating to surrender, continued to search for a way to escape. And then he thought of a way. If the goal was far away, then all he had to do was get closer. His goal, in a nutshell, was to find somebody who would help him. In other words, somebody other than his captors. If If he faked being sick, then his captors would have to take him to the hospital or bring a doctor to him. They would probably be reluctant to do that, but he already knew that the hostage was more important than anything. In the off chance that something happened, like him dying occurred, he wouldn't be able to threaten anybody anymore. Luckily, he had an experience that would help him fake a serious illness. At the end of last year, he was inadvertently involved in a car accident and had to undergo surgery. The scar from that surgery was still clearly visible on his lower torso. He recalled the pain and suffering from that time. The existence of that experience would make a huge impact on the realism of his performance. He was quite confident in his ability to fake an illness. Pretty smart for a little kid. Captors at first took that as a sign that he needed to use the washroom. Untying only his arms, they tried to bring him to where he was still blindfolded. But he didn't try to get up. His hands, now free, only clutched at his abdomen as he writhed in agony.
おい、どうしたんだ？腹でも痛いのか？
Still had his earplugs in, so he had to pretend that he didn't hear his captors asking the question. He was able to nod, so he hurriedly had to stop himself.
どったんね。
小僧が腹を押さえてるよ。腹痛かな。
Captors looked down on his suffering and formed for a bit. One of them proposed a course of action, while another laid his doubts that Toshiki might be faking it.
どったんね。腹痛むんかい？
そいつ耳を塞いでるから聞こえてないぜ。
参ったんな。腹痛に効く薬なんかあらんね。薬局行って買ってくるか。
腹痛って言ったっていろんな薬があるだろう。症状がわからないうちはいい加減な薬は買えないぜ。
腹押さえてるし。便秘や。
Maybe he's just constipated. Maybe he needs to take a screamer.
便秘薬でも買ってくれば収まるやんね。間違って飲んでも死なんしな。
決めつけるなよ。盲腸とかかもしれないだろう。俺のおじさんがさ、昔急になったことあってよ。あれはかなりビビったぜ。
One of the captors leaned over beside the boy, who was bent over in agony.
かわいそうにな。全身汗だらけじゃないかよ。腹か？痛むのか？おいおい、痛むんならあんまり抑え込んじゃかえって悪いぞ。
Realizing that his captors were concerned about his stomach, he inadvertently let his shirt ride up, letting the scar from his surgery come into plain view. Vision was still obscured with packing tape, so he couldn't see the reaction to his scar. But his captors were taken aback, and judging from their momentary silence, he had obtained the reaction he was looking for.
おい、やばいぜ。この手術跡、そんなに昔のものじゃないぜ。
その小僧、熱出てるんかいね。体温計あるん？
あるわけねえよ。でもすごい汗だぜ。おでこは結構熱いと思う。
This kid's doing pretty good for, like, being a little kid.
緊張状態が続くとさ、昔の傷なんかに応えたりするって聞いたことあるぜ。
じゃあどうすんよ。薬じゃ治らんちゅんてんか？
何の手術跡か知らねえけど、とにかくまずいだろ。下手すると命に関わるぜ。
まずいんて。これは本当にまずいんて。
医者に見せた方がいい。このままじゃ突然ぽっくりいっちまう可能性だってあるだろう。
Toshiki Inogai, with those few words, knew that the situation was progressing exactly as he had envisioned it, and snickering to himself on the inside, pressed his act even further. He didn't even need to see what his captors were panicked and were running around like chickens with their heads cut off at this troublesome turn of events.
診療所連れて行くか？
そりゃまずん。先生を連れてくる方がいいね。
入江の先生か？いいのか？大丈夫か？
人質に何かあったらまずんね。しゃあない。緊急事態やん。
So, we know Dr. Irie from the last chapter. I mean, we've probably seen him more than once in our gameplay. So I'm curious to see how they're going to bring the Dr. Irie that we know to this cabin in the middle of nowhere with this little hostage boy. Because I'm sure that he's not in on it. I'm quite certain that he's not in on the kidnapping because he's very empathetic. One of the captors hurriedly left in the car. Another of the men, completely shaken up at this point, wiped the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. It looked like they were bringing a doctor. As long as the doctor wasn't an accomplice, that doctor was his goal. He was someone he should seek help from. His captors were probably wary of that happening. They would be prepared for it. This would all come down to luck. Some of the sweat emerging from his brow was from that nervousness. At that moment, the packing tape that was covering his eyes and ears was torn off. The burning light that he was seeing for the first time in several days hurt his eyes. After that, the gag that made it hard for him to breathe was also removed.
大丈夫かこそ。今、お医者を連れてくるからな。しばらく我慢してろな。
The doctor was coming. The doctor was coming. Now, how is he going to ask for help, and how is he going to get away from his captors? A plethora of thoughts began swirling through his mind.
わかってると思うが、お医者に余計なことは言うなよ。俺たちも別にお前に乱暴がしたいわけじゃないんだ。そりゃわかってるよな。
Toshiki Inogai nodded while feigning pain and obedience. His expectations and the enemy's expectations. Whether they doubted he was faking his illness or not, they knew what his goal was and would try to stop it. His stomach contracted from the stress of this gambit, making it seem like his stomach really was starting to hurt. No, it really was. But there was no reason to panic. If he failed with his approach to the doctor, there was nothing to lose. If there was something to lose, it was this method of faking illness to get in touch with the doctor. If he could think of other methods from here on out, it wasn't much. But at the present, this was the easiest and most dramatic way he could think of. The more he thought about it, the more it looked like this was his first and last gambit. Eventually, he heard the sound of a car approaching once again. The sound of the car's doors being hurriedly open and shut. Sounds of several footsteps approaching. A young man in a white medical coat. As he acknowledged the boy, a suspicious look showed itself on his face.
彼は村の子じゃありませんね。
Yeah, I don't know how they're going to pull this off. Captors didn't respond. Looks of it, the young doctor had realized this was an abnormal situation. One of the captors talked threateningly.
先生には関係のないことです。
For a while, the doctor and the captor suddenly glared at one another. However, unable to stand the sight of the boy continuing to suffer, the doctor, as the captors had hoped, didn't press any further.
その古い手術跡というのが何の手術でしたか？
そりゃわからないです。
本当は診療所に連れ帰るべきなんですがね。
That's going to be a big no.
先生、そりゃさすがにちょっと。
Doctor said he wanted to bring the boy back to the clinic, but the captors simply silently shook their heads at the notion. It was a fleeting hope, but it was only natural that the captors would refuse. That moment, his eyes met with the doctor's. Seeing that the boy's painful state was abnormal, doctors suspected it was a serious illness.
大丈夫ですか？
I'm not alright. Get me the out of here.
私は医者です。この手術跡はいつ頃のものですか？
去年の冬に事故で。
事故？そうですか。参ったな。
Couldn't let the doctor figure out that he was faking it here. He had to somehow figure out a way to keep this going and tell the doctor that he was being confined and needed help.
患部を少し触りますよ。痛むところがあったら言ってくださいね。
Seeing that it was extremely painful, the doctor crossed his arms and began to ponder. He had to somehow get himself to a hospital. To Toshiki Inogai, faking this illness was the performance of a lifetime. Interesting. They're not going to let him go to a hospital. That's not going to happen. But at least now like the doctor knows where we are. And we know that Akasaka and Ooishi,
皆さんもご苦労さんなことです。
we know that they know the general area where the kid is. So, I mean, they've got to find him soon, right?
お暑いでしょうが、せいぜい頑張ってくださいよ。不法投棄のダンプが現れたらすぐにご連絡ください。急行いたしますのでね。
ご協力感謝しますよ、大石さん。どうぞ。
A gap wide enough for a single car was opened up in the barricade. Ooishi, showing his gratitude or perhaps a threatening attitude, with a short beep on the horn, rolled the car forward through the checkpoint. This time, my appearance was the very embodiment of the word suspicious. Baseball cap, mask, and sunglasses. Top of that, even though it was sweltering, I was wearing a hoodie. Any respectable police officer would be loath to not stop me for questioning. I'd meant to be overcautious, knowing full well that my face was known, but it might have already been too late for that to have any use. Using that as an excuse, what a good word. I doffed the unbearably hot hoodie and windbreaker, ripped off the mask and hat, and threw them in the seat behind me.
ありゃいいんですか？
こんな小細工したところで、どうせ割れているでしょうから。
そりゃまあそうでしょうな。
Ooishi, probably thinking that my unexpected behavior was funny, continued to laugh. The beautiful and pristine scenery of Hinamizawa spread out before me. The village itself would have been quite beautiful if it weren't for the complicated circumstances surrounding the moment. I would absolutely love to take Yuki here for a drive one day. Come to think of it, I didn't get a chance to call her last night. I played around with the idea in my head. And in reality, this village wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. I had heard everything at the prefectural headquarters. At the heart of this village, the intelligence network that the three families wielded was, due to blood ties and regional relationships, unbelievably well organized. Their net spread not just around Hinamizawa itself, but encapsulated the entirety of the city of Shishibone as well. When I first heard that, somewhere in the recesses of my mind, I didn't take it completely seriously. How could a local organization out in the boonies have something so grandiose? I couldn't deny that somewhere in the back of my mind I had ridiculed the thought. That's because everybody in the Shishibone district that holds that owns a business or holds a political office is related to the Sonozake clan in some shape or form. There's a lot of Sonozakis. They're a huge family. But not only were they really threatening the minister, but they had demonstrated they had a complete grasp on our movements, which were supposed to be top secret. They were almost like the secret police that controlled a small Eastern European country like in some spy novel. The villagers here wouldn't bat an eye at getting their hands dirty if that meant fighting the dam project. I also heard something like that at the prefectural headquarters. Now that you mention it, when I first arrived here, Ooishi also said that this place was a war zone, didn't he? The residents of this village were at the same time freedom fighters. Although by definition, they were no different than guerrillas or militia. They weren't protected by the Geneva Convention, but they also didn't have to adhere to those rules either. This place was more of a quagmire than any legitimate battlefield. A secret war was unfolding. I could drive along because Ooishi was with me. But if I was to leave this car for even something as trivial as looking for a vending machine, there was a chance I wouldn't return. Even though a single shot hadn't been fired, this was a battlefield. No, the reason why bullets weren't flying was simply because it was hard for a civilian to obtain a gun in Japan. So they were probably just equipped with weapons other than guns that were easy to obtain. That was why Ooishi was wearing the stab-proof vest, wasn't it?
赤坂さん、緊張してます。
The fact that I was apprehensive, of course, was picked up on by Ooishi. If you already figured it out, there was no point in trying to deny or hide it.
もちろんです。敵の本拠地にたった2人で乗り込んでいるんですよ。この人数では万一の時が不安です。
万一の時？大丈夫ですよ。
この村の人間すべてが敵ではありませんでしたか。全員が口裏を合わせれば、この村で白昼堂々殺人が起こっても証拠一つ残らない。そういうところだと聞いていますよ。
Yeah, so I don't know if they can get away with killing a cop, but they definitely are all a very tightly knit group of people. This is what the ironclad rule of not barging into a Yakuza office alone was about. If there wasn't a neutral party involved, that area wasn't bound by the laws of common sense. If something happened, you wouldn't be able to prove it, and there wasn't anybody who would take your side. Pretty much the definition of poking the bear.
ひなみ沢地区へ向かうと同僚に言い残してますしね。万一の時は無線機もありますし、赤坂さんが怖がってるほどね、そう簡単には完全犯罪はできませんよ。まあ、もちろん油断をしないに越したことはありませんがね。赤坂さん、緊張しすぎですよ。前にご一緒してた時の方がリラックスしてらしたじゃないですか。な。
Well, last time we came up here, I wasn't aware that everybody knew who I was. I can't hide anymore. They all know that I'm a cop. Laughing it off, Ooishi thumped his chest and grinned as if to say I could depend on him.
まあ、本当の本当にヤバくなったら、桜の大門にはこいつがありますからね。
Ooishi made a motion by sticking out his index finger. It was undoubtedly the image of a gun.
役に立ちますか？
撃った後の後始末云々が怖くなければ、実に心強いですよ。
Okay, so they They put on the stab-proof vests, and they also brought their guns with them. The officer's gun was only for show. If they wanted to fire it, there were quite a number of stipulations, and he had to be prepared for the long probationary period afterwards. It definitely wasn't worth it, so even if an officer did unholster his gun, there wasn't one who actually wanted to pull the trigger.
赤坂さんは持ってるんですか？これ。
まあ、一応。
撃ったことは？
ありますよ。訓練で、ですがね。
そりゃそうでしょうな。
なら大石さんにはあるんですか？
私ですか？なまさかあるわけないじゃないですか。
What was this? I thought he was laughing at me because he had experience. Two of us laughed together.
銃口を向けたこともありませんがね。銃口を向けられたことなら何度かありますよ。銃口を覗かされるだけで寿命が3年は縮むな。
Even if he'd never fired a gun before, I couldn't even begin to compare the amount of experience Ooishi had over me. At a time like this, I could only marvel again at how reliable Ooishi seemed.
そういえば日の高いうちにこっちには来たくなかったな。でも車道はここを抜ける以外にないし。赤坂さん、念のためもう一回マスクで顔を隠してください。
どうしたんです？
冷房がうるさいから聞こえないかな？切りますよ。窓を開けてみてください。
Can you not hear it? What are we listening to? I opened the window, a blast of hot air blew inside. And then, I could hear an angry yelling coming from far away. At that moment, the forest gave way on either side of us, and our view expanded suddenly. There could be seen the Hinumazawa Dam construction grounds. Oh, are they in the middle of like a protest, maybe? Is that why we hear the shouting? The very front line for Hinumazawa Village. Crackling blare of someone's voice sounded over the enormous loudspeaker. A roar of angry voices continued to rumble. The incredible volume had become a veritable sound cannon, spewing out its ammunition. The prefabricated site office was surrounded by 2 sets of high fences laced with barbed wire. Lined up in front of those fences were riot police in their vehicles. And surrounding it all were the villagers. They howled out their protests against the dam as a single entity.
お、今日は少ないですね。ついてます。
少ないんですか？
ええ、多い時だと道路までいっぱいになりますよ。うちうち車も通れません。
At first, due to their overwhelming intensity, it looked to me like there was more people than there actually was, but upon closer inspection there were at most 50 to 70 of them. But the 6 or 7 propaganda trucks lined up that looked like they belonged to a band of thugs were a strange enough sight. Villagers were also wearing helmets and bandanas, as well as covering their faces with masks, adding to the oddity of it all. Propaganda trucks, after braying their chorus, had their volume turned up even higher and began to flood the area with sutras. To say that the noise was downright violent wouldn't be an understatement. From this distance, it was still this loud. Glass in the office was probably rattling from the noise.
あれをガンガンやられるとたまんないんですよね。昨日の連中、全員耳栓してて、それでも耳がおかしくなるそうです。気の毒な話です。
騒音規制でなんとかできないんですか？
うちの県には騒音規制に関する規定ね。それにほら、お経でしょ。宗教活動規制できないし、連中も頭いいんです。
That is pretty smart. So they're shouting like religious sutras, religious terminology, phrases at them. I see. Is what I think Ooishi said. Actually, no matter how tightly the window was shut, the booming sound of the sutras still filled the car. Couldn't even hear what Ooishi, who was sitting right next to me, was saying. As the car approached the line of propaganda trucks, the blare became difficult to bear. It wasn't enough to just plug my ears with my fingers. I had to hold my head to keep my skull from splitting apart. If I had seen this terrifying energy sooner, I would have probably understood why Hinamazawa was much quicker. Now I knew. They wouldn't blink an eye at sacrificing themselves in order to protect their hometown. So goddamn noisy. Shut up, shut up, shut up! My head throbbed and felt like it was going to split apart. My eardrums crackled, and on top of it all, I felt like I was going to throw up. With the road crowded with a throng of squatters, the propaganda trucks, and the riot police's vehicles, it was in no way easy to get by. Even if you tried to shoo the squatters with the car horn, They were also wearing earplugs, oblivious to noises from the outside world, and wouldn't easily move. The car could only inch forward at a snail's pace. Even then, the car eventually got through, starting to leave the tumultuous noise behind.
ほら、昨日一緒に麻雀やったメンツにお年寄りさんいたでしょ。覚えてます？
So the old guy that was playing Mahjong, he's the dam construction project leader, who I believe is the one that we've read about in news articles that like started the chain of Hinamizawa murders. Remember that there was an older person who didn't exactly mince words. The guy that Ooishi called Old
いら
Man.
っしゃいましたね。
彼ね、第一航空の現場監督さんなんですよ。あそこのプレハブの中でイライラしながら仕事をなさってるんでしょうね。お気の毒なことです。
あれが毎日ではたまったものではないでしょう。
耐えかねて辞めちゃう人が後を絶ちません。まあ、その度にお給金がアップしてるんで何とも言えませんが。
Even having to deal with all that noise and hostility, they still made a wage that Ooishi found enviable.
ちくしょう、こいつら。聞こえてるのか聞こえてないのか。
A group of squatters were in the way of the car. Ooishi, sufficiently annoyed, laid into the horn, but there was no indication that they were moving anytime soon. In this din, could they not even hear a car horn? Or did they hear it and were being malicious? If there were any riot police nearby, they would have made people move, but it just so happened that there weren't any around here.
もう、ちょいと待っててください。
Ooishi opened up the door. And he opened up the door and fired blindly into the crowd. Move! The hot air and even more heated roar of the crowd spilled into the car. Ooishi said something as he grinned widely, but I couldn't hear what it was. He was getting them to move. Something like that? Did he flash his gun? What was he doing? We stepped out of the car and closed the door. The din faded slightly. I stared blankly as Ooishi headed towards the group and started some sort of conversation. Maybe we'd find the minister's grandson in Takatsudo. At the very least, I wanted to find him there. Find him and slip the cursed bonds of this incomprehensible village. I could only pray. At that moment, a shadow was suddenly cast over me. Somebody was standing right outside the passenger side window, blocking the sunlight. I spun around, looked up, and realized who the backlit figure was. Is it Rika? It's my Rika! It was a girl. It was Rika Furude. This girl stared down at me with a bored look in her eyes. I didn't have any justification for it, but I felt like I had been found by somebody I shouldn't be found by. To fill the silence, I raised my hand as I mouthed a meek greeting. Nipa! Hi! Of course, there was no way she heard my small voice in this clamor. But even then, she should have seen me wave my hand in greeting. In spite of that, she simply stared down at me with a cold look on her face. That moment, noise and heat spread throughout the car once again. Ooishi had returned to the driver's seat. Taking a look, the group that were blocking the road had started to move aside while glaring our way.
お待たせしました。行きましょうか。
Ooishi registered the figure of the girl behind me. One of the villagers came over and picked her up. In a manner of, "It's dangerous, so get away." It was then that she whispered one or two words. However, I couldn't hear any of it.
さて、行きましょうかね。飛ばしますよ。もちろん、法定速度遵守で。
As if to shake off the still audible angry voices, Ooishi floored the gas. Along with the roar and the din and the shouting, the villagers and the girl quickly disappeared behind us.
この先を抜けると高津戸地区です。銃撃戦の覚悟は大丈夫ですか？安全装置外すの土壇場でとちらないでくださいよ。
Do we not have backup coming with us? It's just me and Ooishi? Ooishi laughed mockingly again. I was more concerned with what the girl had said, however, as I was vaguely bothered by it. What was she trying to say with that apathetic and candid expression?
今から緊張したって仕方ないですよ。むしろ収穫がなくて勇み足って可能性だって十分にあるんですから。
There's no longer a way to confirm what the girl had tried to tell me. She was probably telling you to leave. The last time we talked to Rika, she like changed her expression, her personality, and said that we better go back to Tokyo or we were going to regret it. She was probably saying, like, get the F out. Might have been that the girl wanted me to go back to Tokyo again, or else was saying to me who was here now, ignoring that warning.
警告したのにバカなやつ。
Yeah, she warned us. She said, go back to Tokyo. Stupid Akasaka is what she said. I had the feeling she had said something like that. Interesting. Yeah. We get any new tips? Oh no, we're still going. Oh, okay. I thought that was the end of the chapter. If you were to call Hinamizawa a rather lonely village, then Takatsuta was outright desolate. For your everyday city boy like me, I just couldn't understand why anybody would force themselves to live here. There were signs that people had, but they were all covered in dust or enveloped in ivy, indicating that it was all abandoned.
こんなところにも人は住んでいたんですね。
まあ昔の話でしょうな。こんな偏僻なとこじゃ年寄りには辛いですし、若者だってもう少しまともな土地に住みたいでしょうしね。後を継ぐ者がいなきゃ最後にはこうなるってことでしょうな。
Even if I had no personal attachment to the village, seeing the disused buildings made me feel a little sentimental. It seemed that Ooishi also felt that same way.
こんなところで財布が発見されたんですか。財布の取得者もよくこんなに偏僻なところに通りかかったものですね。
ああ、村人には山の中に畑を持ってる連中がいましてね。そういう連中は朝晩ここを通りますから。
畑仕事の村人たちは早朝や夕方にここを徒歩で通ると。
まさか行けるところまでは車で行くでしょうな。
早朝や夕方にこんなところを走行して落ちているたった一つの財布を発見できます。
They found it on purpose.
できたんでしょうな。
取得者はどこで取得したと言っていますか。
もう少し先を行ったところにある茂みです。取得者はたまたまお腹が痛くなってちょいと茂みで用を足そうと思ったらしい。それで偶然見つけたらしいんですよ。中にちり紙でも入ってるのを期待したんですかね。
話ができすぎているように感じます。財布発見の当初からそういう違和感が拭えません。
I expressed a feeling that I had from the start of the day, quite frankly. It seemed too good to be true, but it was unwavering proof. It was too perfect, sickeningly so. That was my feeling.
できすぎってな、案外当たってるかもしれませんよ。
Right, like they planned it. They planned to give the wallet to us.
というと、
実は四課のお友達からちょいと聞いたんですがね、園崎お涼が大臣の孫の誘拐事件について言及したって話なんです。
言及した？
大臣の孫ももう誘拐されてから何日にもなってかわいそうだ。そろそろ解放されるといいなと。そう、お涼のばあさんが縁側でぼそりとつぶやいたってな話らしいんです。
Right, that was in the last chapter. She was like on her porch, her veranda or whatever, and was talking about how like the boy needs to go home.
で、そのぼそりが園崎家の裏の裏のあちこちに伝えられてるようです。
Right. I'd heard something earlier from Sato-san, the informant, that when the leader Oryo had a concern, somebody in the family would be considerate.
つまりそれは実質上の人質解放命令です
So
か。
we also know that at the end of the chapter, during that tip scene, when Oryo was talking about how she wanted the boy to be released, Mion called her father, who's like the local gang leader or whatever. So, like, we know that they're involved.
私はそう見てます。
So the people that have kidnapped the boy are like Mion's dad and his cronies.
この出来すぎの財布発見は孫を警察に引き渡すためのイベントじゃないかと。
どうして人質の解放を？
そりゃ人質を解放するなんて理由は一つしかないじゃないですか。
なんです？
取引の成立ですよ。ひなみ沢ダム計画の中止を大臣が約束ってことですかね。
ダム計画なんて必ずなくなっちゃいますのです。
That moment, those words that the girl had said had resurfaced in the back of my mind. In the end, it was turning out exactly as she had proclaimed. That young girl knew the circumstances. She knew everything about this kidnapping incident, from the beginning to the end.
Akasaka?
The girl unexpectedly called my name.
なんだい？
東京へ帰れ。
Huh?
あなたはもう幾ばくもしないうちに、それがあまりにもみすぼらしくて気の毒、今のうちから警告してあげているのです。
どうして私が後悔することになる？
いちいちうるさいな。あなたの親はあなたが赤信号の横断歩道の真ん中にいるとき、どうして危ないのかを全部説明し終えるまで引っ張るでしょ。まず歩道まで連れ戻してから。つまりはそういうこと。
So we've heard all this before. This is the like kind of underlying threat that Rika was giving us earlier. The girl, who knew everything from start to finish, had warned me in the beginning, go back to Tokyo. And we didn't listen.
赤坂の怖がり。
孫は無事見つかるでしょうが、その後はいろいろと厄介な問題になるでしょうな。どう厄介になるかは一警察官の私には想像もつきませんがね。
Well, you said don't be scared if there's a firefight were your words, Ooishi. You were like, if a
フルで理
firefight
解
breaks out, be ready.
ご存知ですか？
What I had said was just a non sequitur that Ooishi sat in stunned silence for a while.
もちろん知ってますよ。御三家の一つ、古出家の一人娘ですね。
どういう少女なんです？
おやおや、これは意外な人物名にちょっと驚きです。公安では古出家が臭いと睨んでおられるわけで、私にも情報を分けてくださいよ。
あ、いや、そういうのじゃないんです。ちょっと気になったもので。
まあいいや。同じ宅を囲んだ友人の質問なら答えないわけにはいきませんからね。
友人と呼んでいただけて光栄です。
で、あのお嬢ちゃんはね、まあ村のマスコットみたいなもんです。村中の誰からも愛されてます。中でも年寄り連中には特に崇められてましてね。
崇められる？
よくは知らないんですがね、古出家に生まれた女の子ってのには多少神聖な意味合いがあるらしいんですよ。ひなみ沢の土着信仰ですがね。
Yeah, so she's like the priestess for the Watanagashi festival, right? Like we've seen her dance and perform like the ritual. So she's like, I don't know, they
お
worship
社
her in
様
some
の生まれ
capacity.
変わりだとかなんとか、そんな話があるらしいですよ。
お社様。そういえば同盟の登り旗の中にお社様と書かれたものがあったような気がします。何ですか、お社様って？
なあ、ひなみ沢の守り神様の名前です。村にあだなす者に罰を当てるって信じられてましてね。まあそんな便利な神様がいたらダムの連中はとっくに神罰にやられているんでしょうが、幸い今日までその罰ってやつは一つも起こってませんがね。
村にあだなす大臣の孫がお社様の怒りに触れ、なんて言いましたっけ？そう、鬼隠し。
Right, demoned away, Onikakushi, right?
大臣の孫を
Demoned away.
鬼隠しにしたと。
Yeah, see, I'm remembering.
そういう筋書きになるわけでしょうか？
なるほどな。そういうことになるんでしょうな。
お社様が下した神罰なら、犯人はお社様の生まれ変わりであるあの少女。
Even I didn't know exactly what I was saying. The fact that Ooishi laughed it off was a bit of a relief. Oishi's joyous laughter was so infectious that I began to laugh like an idiot as well.
ありゃ、こりゃ珍しい。
Ooishi, after laying into the horn several times, rolled the window down and leaned out, waving his arm in an exaggerated manner. It was a car headed the opposite way. Till now we hadn't rented any cars except our own. Is this Dr. Irie? And of all places, it was at this desolate location. It seemed that Ooishi knew the owner of the car. The other car had also chirped his horn and came to a stop. This is Dr. Irie. These fuckers about to get caught up.
入江の先生こんにちは
The other car's window rolled down slowly, revealing a young man in a white overcoat. He was about my age, or perhaps a bit older. You really can't judge anybody by their appearance.
大石さんじゃありませんか。こんにちは。珍しいところでお会いしますね。
そりゃこっちのセリフですよ先生まさかこんなところで会うとはねどうしたんです
いえね、ちょっとした往診です。
A little house call for who?
ありゃそうですか休館とかでしたか
いえ、そんなに大したことではありませんでした。よかったですよ。
お医者の世話にならずに済むならそれに越したことはないです
Ask the question, Ooishi. Who were you seeing all the way out here?
ではこれで、急いで戻らないとスタッフに怒られますんで。
Pause. Who were you seeing?
診療所長さんも大変ですではではお気をつけて
Wait. What? No! What are you doing? The young doctor named Irie, after gesturing his farewell, drove forwards and soon disappeared around a corner. Ooishi also drove forwards, but soon came to a stop again. Pulled out a warm map book from the dash. His expression didn't have an ounce of irreverence. He was perfectly serious.
どうしたんです？
今日は診療所は往診の日じゃないはずです
Right.
よっぽどの休館か特殊な事情のある患者ということになりますね
So we should have asked him while he was right there. Ooishi flipped through the pages, opening up the map of Takatsudo. After that, he took a look around and started to figure out what our current location was.
その休館が怪しいということですか。
Yeah, if nobody lives in this town, other than a few choice people, that's
言ったで
probably
しょ
important.
高津戸地区にね、
Yeah.
今私たちがいる道は
Wise up, Akasaka. Get your head out of your ass. Come on.
入江先生はこの道に対して
You're getting bested by
こっち
Ooishi
の
here.
方向から走ってきたと
Having no sense of our surroundings, I couldn't digest anything about the place he was indicating on the map.
私たちは財布の取得場所を目指していますちなみに取得場所はここでもね高津戸地区にわずかにある民家に向かうにはそもそも道が違うんです
つまり、入江医師は民家のない方角から来たと。
山間の段々畑で農作業中に誰かが倒れたってのでない限りね人が倒れて医者が呼ばれたら普通は連れ帰って詳しく調べるもんですでもさっき理恵医師は大したことはなかったと言いましたね車には他には誰も乗っていなかったようですし
Ooishi didn't say any more than that. I also said nothing more. The doctor just now examined a patient, close by. Only that. The noisy radio had suddenly gone quiet. The sky had just as suddenly turned an oppressive color. As Ooishi mused that it might start to rain, a torrential downpour started, as though trying not to disappoint him. Eventually, Ooishi stopped the car. The only sounds to break the silence were the percussion of the rain on the roof and the soft squeak of the windshield wipers.
ちょいと静か静かで行きましょうかね
We're doing like ASMR radio now. Ooishi's going to do some whispering. Shh. Saying that in a quiet voice, he exited the car without an umbrella, careful not to make any noise. Shh. Ooishi leaned over, indicating the other side of the thicket. He was pointing to a prefabricated shed and a car that was parked beside it. The car looked obviously well cared for. It wasn't a vehicle that had been left there for several years.
あの小屋は
営林署の機材小屋です夏場以外は利用されてないと聞きました
あの車は営林署の職員。
さあね公用車には見えないですね
Ooishi was playing it cool, but my nervousness was gradually increasing.
一応は念のため
Saying that, Ooishi returned to the car. Thought he was going to get an umbrella, but he had grabbed the onboard radio instead.
もしもし大石です聞こえてるかなこんにちはこんにちは
はい沖宮 PS 大石さん 感度良好です。どうぞ。
今高津戸地区の営林省機材小屋前です。矢後地に向かう方じゃないよ。南沢から高津戸に入る方の。
はい、確認しました。
小屋に不審者。これより職質します。5分で連絡なかったら駐在所に連絡と大至急応援パトを送ってください。よろしくお願いします。
了解しました。
Smart. So we are requesting backup at least.
じゃあ行ってみましょうかね。
He was the first confined here. He'd heard the sound of a car multiple times. We just thought the far-off sound was more of the same. However, the reaction from his captors was, until now, something he hadn't seen before. They jumped, reacting as if shocked by a jolt of electricity, and pressed against the window, cautiously peering outside.
止まったな。
営林署の人間まずいぜ。
いや、警察やんな。
One of the captors lifted the boy by his collar and pressed a blade against his cheek.
お兄ちゃんちょい静かにしててな。分かってると思うけど大声出したりすると大変なことになるからな。
Toshiki Inugai was sure that the doctor had reported things to the police. He had felt relief when he thought he was saved, but not imagining that his captors would resort to violence when they were cornered, his anxiety remained unabated.
どうする？
時間稼いでる。小僧連れてちょい裏から抜けな。ほとぼり冷めたら打ち合う。
So Oreo asked that the boy be released, but maybe the message was not passed all the way down along the line, because if we're threatening to, like, hurt the kid or kill the kid if we get caught, like, we obviously, somewhere along the game of telephone, the message was not received. One of the perpetrators grabbed the boy by the collar and forced him to stand. Of course, Toshiki Inugai tried to resist by feigning that his illness had been aggravated by this rough treatment, but his captors paid no heed. Bang, bang, bang. The door was violently banged upon.
ごめんください。こんにちは。
Bang, 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 bang. The door was banged on again. Toshiki Inugai hesitated for a moment to respond to that voice by yelling. However, while he was being indecisive, his mouth was covered, taking that option away from him. The leader of the captives waved at the other to go. The younger perpetrator nodded in response, and while keeping the boy's mouth covered, started heading towards the back door.
はいはい。何かご用かいね。
どうも。警察ですがね。ここちょっと開けてもらっていいですか。急な雨で困っちゃいましてね。
ええ、今開けます。
The moment the lock was undone, Ooishi forced the door open. With a gleam of menace in his eyes, he pushed the man aside as he stepped into the room. Then, in the small and empty room, he was able to quickly discern that the boy he was looking for was nowhere to be seen.
あれ？私はここは営林署の機材倉庫だって聞いてたんですけどね。何にもありませんね。
Nothing inside the room that would indicate that this was an equipment shed. There's only a mountain of blankets, indicating that somebody was sleeping here, alongside empty food packets strewn about.
ああ、ここはずいぶん前から空っぽさね。機材がしまってあるところなんて見たこともね
えや。でも営林署の建物でしょ。あんた営林署の人？
あんたこそ誰よ。警察？
Two of them glared at each other suspiciously. Both Ooishi and the man steadfastly refused to reveal their identity before the other did. The man, judging from the sharp look in Oishi's eyes, realized that it would be hard to talk this way out of this one. No matter what he said, the most time he could buy would probably be only a few dozen seconds. Only the sound of the rain filled this tense moment. Just then, they heard the sound of a struggle from far off. Ooishi had a hunch. There was no doubt that Akasaka, who was circling around back, had run into the perpetrators who were trying to slip away. Ooishi thought that. The man in front of him reacted a moment faster. The man swung with an attack that was more intended to obscure Oishi's vision rather than actually hit him in the face. Seizing his opportunity, the man aimed a kick at Oishi's groin without any hesitation, right in the dick! And he missed his mark and was able to land that critical blow on Oishi's tiny baby testicles. Where are they? How do you miss kicking somebody in the dick? Bad move, dude. The man, trying to pin Ooishi, grabbed him by the base of his neck with both hands and fiercely tried to push him down. But as Ooishi fell backwards, as if kicking the man upward, he dug his foot into the man's midsection. With that leg acting as a fulcrum, the man was flung by the falling Ooishi as if by a circle throw. Two of them squared off in the pouring rain.
面白いじゃないの。俺とやろうってか?
Yeah, I would not want to fucking fight Ooishi. He's gonna fight dirty. He's gonna be biting you. Throwing dirt in your eye. Ooishi, as if trying to cheer himself on, grinned smugly. He then stood up while brushing the mud off of himself. Even though he countered the assault, Ooishi was getting up rather awkwardly compared to the man who he threw, who swiftly sprang to his feet.
Oi-san! Hayaku!
Akasaka's voice rang out from the distance. Judging from the distress in his voice, he was already engaged in a fight, and wanted Ooishi to reconvene with him. But Oishi's hands were full as well.
Akasaka-san! 申し訳ない! ちょっと待っててくださいよ!
And raised both fists into a stance that hinted at him being acquainted with karate or some other form of martial art. Of course, Ooishi, as an officer of the law, was decently versed in judo. He also had the moxie to have been through his fair share of fights before. Because of that, he told the man in front of him was quite a bit better at fighting than he was. Ah, damn it. Thinking this was going to be easy just because the order came from the Sonozake family to release the hostage had been a big mistake.
なかなか上等じゃないの。久々に胃液がこみ上げてくる感じがしますよ。
So they were told by the Sonozakis to release the boy and they just didn't do it? Is that what he was saying? That it was a big mistake? That they just weren't going to release the boy? Ooishi played off the situation like it was no sweat. His opponent, seeing his attitude, took that to mean that Ooishi wasn't going to go down easily. Now he's about to whoop your ass. I don't like Ooishi, I think he's a scumbag, but he's definitely gonna whoop the shit out of you. Man wildly charged forward, attempting to grab Ooishi. The man managed a successful clinch from his low stance. Ooishi would be tackled to the ground and end up being mounted. Something you saw often when children fought, but it really was a bad position since you couldn't do much once you were in it. Ooishi, responding to that move, also lowered his stance to collide with the man head-on. The moment they clashed, Ooishi grabbed the man's lapel. As he yanked the lapel upwards, he smashed into the man's solar plexus with the elbow of the same arm. It was a move from Ooishi's own personal brand of brawling judo. He then grabbed on with his free hand and attempted to throw his opponent with both hands. But the man lowered his center of gravity and swung his arms in a large arc, entwining them with Ooishi's. Not only that, but he had forced both of Ooishi's elbows to the outside, and Ooishi, now in an awkward position, was in danger of exposing his back with his hands still clutching the man's chest. This guy practiced Aikido or grappling, didn't he? Ooishi, cursing the fact that his fingers were twisted into the man's shirt and couldn't get away, released his grip. He was still in the awkward position of being bent over. And to top it off, at zero range, and was able to read Ooishi's movements completely as he tried to squirm his way into a better position. And then, he took the palms of his hands and swiftly clapped them over both of Ooishi's ears. Oof. Clapping the ears in any other martial art, except for self-defense, was basically forbidden. Karate and Judo didn't recognize it as legal technique. It was that much of a simple and dangerous attack. Ooishi raised both his hands as he tried to reflexively clutch at his own ears. Before that could happen, the man wrapped his arms around Ooishi's neck. His thick biceps clenched firmly around the base of Ooishi's neck like a vice. Ooishi instinctively thought he was going to be killed. After all, it wasn't hard to believe that a man like this, who was accustomed to fighting, could crush his opponent's neck from this position. Uh-oh, it's all going red. But his opponent didn't do that. He had chosen to keep his hold and force Ooishi to lose consciousness. That's why Ooishi, at that moment, even though his face was twitching, was grinning widely. Even though his opponent had a chance to kill him, he didn't choose to. He was thinking, this guy has no intention of killing me. However, even though that might be the case, the man's hold on his neck was by no means gentle. In no time at all, Ooishi's consciousness began to fade. Having the experience of being taken down countless times in judo during his student days, Ooishi was utterly resigned to the fact that it was over. Oh, so Ooishi just lost the fight. Huh. Akasaka was finally recovering from the intense pain of being kicked in a rather sensitive area. Oh, he got kicked in the dick. He had bumped into the captor carrying the boy by the back entrance. He had seen Toshiki Inogai's picture plenty of times, but wasn't able to immediately ascertain that the boy in front of him was the real deal, with his mouth covered in packing tape. Also, with his limited experience, it wasn't hard for him to panic over how to deal with the situation. Of course, the perpetrator didn't overlook this momentary lapse. Kicks landed squarely in a critical spot in his dick, with Akasaka not even having time to call for help. As the man flung the boy over his shoulder, he headed towards the front of the shed. But upon hearing Ooishi's bellowing voice, he gave up on going that direction. He then dashed off towards the forest. As if the weight of the boy slung over his shoulder wasn't even there. Akasaka was lost for a moment. Ending up with Ooishi, who was fighting with the enemy, was by far the safer option. But he couldn't just lose sight of the fleeing man. Akasaka stood up and chased the captor's back. He ran through the short thicket, branches and fallen leaves crunching underfoot. Tips of branches raked and clawed at him, small scratches inscribing themselves on his body one after another. He kept on stepping into puddles of mud, and his shoes were soon filled with murky water. For Akasaka, traveling through this unexplored forest was, even though this was an emergency situation, extremely unpleasant. As he said that, he regretted it immediately, as it was but a waste of breath. Wasn't a thief in the world that would politely stop when told to by the police. To a city boy like Akasaka, running through this forest was an arduous task. However, it must have been no easy task either for the man carrying the minister's grandson. He neither gained nor lost ground in his pursuit. Akasaka, upon realizing that, gained back a bit of composure. Just keep on chasing him. You're running in the same conditions. In fact, the man running with an awkward stride was at more of a disadvantage. Couldn't run forever. Eventually, he'd definitely trip and fall. As long as he was being hounded, he would definitely stumble. And soon, his wish was fulfilled. The man, who had stepped in something and lost his balance, was no longer able to bear the weight of the boy, dropping him. Akasaka, in all honesty, didn't care about the perpetrator at all, as long as he could ensure the safety of Toshiki Inogai. But if the perpetrator ran off by himself, it was perfectly acceptable. But it seemed that Toshiki Inogai was important to the man as well, and didn't choose to just run away empty-handed. Akasaka didn't know what to do in this kind of situation. Take out your gun! Even though you can't, shoot the guy, because you're really nervous about it, take out the gun. He doesn't know that. First priority should probably be to ensure the safety of the boy. Subduing his captor should be less important. Grappling with the perpetrator wasn't something he planned on. Most likely, it was either do or die. Akasaka's moment of indecision proved to be fatal. The man, aiming right between, or rather for both of Akasaka's eyes, struck out with a jab. Not wanting that, Akasaka raised both hands to shield his face. At that moment, the man kicked at his unguarded midsection. Pain almost felt like his vital organs were being squeezed out of his body, but he latched onto his opponent's leg. But his opponent didn't hesitate one bit. Leading with his seized foot, the man jumped at Akasaka, applying pressure and pushing him down. Akasaka was unable to withstand that and fell, but under no circumstances was he letting that leg go. Two men fell together in a tangled heap. And were desperate to pull his leg free from Akasaka, but having fallen in an awkward position was unable to. Two of them rolled around on the ground, floundering about trying to gain an advantage. But Akasaka, who was holding onto his opponent's knee with both hands, and that opponent, who had complete freedom to move his upper body, were in two completely different situations. The man gained a positional advantage on Akasaka, who was still latched onto his leg and couldn't move away, and pounded full force on his head with both fists. Not only that, he found a rock nearby and beat it against Akasaka's skull. Jesus. Thwack, thwack, thwack. The difference between being hit with a fist and being hit with a rock was vast. Yeah, no it is. Akasaka quickly thought of letting go of the man's leg to free his hands to protect his head. But if he let go here, the man would get away. If he didn't dig in here, everything would be for naught. The boy he was trying to save was right there. He was going to save him and go back to Tokyo. Fight him! Bite his dick, Akasaka. If he could do that, then it was goodbye to this freakish village. Bam! Crack! Thud! Not looking, I could tell my forehead was split open and was gushing blood. But I didn't let go of the man's leg. How could I? I wouldn't let go. I didn't realize that no matter how much he beat my head, he wasn't getting away. He used both hands to grab my throat as if to crush my windpipe. I pulled my head back as a slight form of resistance, but it was of no use. The man's hands enveloped my neck and began to crush it like a vice. It was less about the pain of not being able to breathe, as much as it was about choking so hard I felt like I was going to throw up. I felt like my stomach was going to turn itself inside out. But I could only endure it. Damn it, damn it, damn it. My throat hurts. I won't let go. I can't let go. I didn't want to be here. I wanted to resolve this and go back to Tokyo. Go back to Tokyo. And talk to Yuki. All about our unborn child. We were going to talk about our bright future. I had no intention of loosening my grip. However, it loosened just a bit, the man's leg came free. The man kicked as hard as possible and I tumbled backwards. My head was spinning and I was unable to get up right away. No, I couldn't even put any strength into getting up in the first place. Even so, I couldn't back down. If I let him escape now, the chance would never come again. Even just catching their scent was nothing short of a miracle. If we weren't able to get the minister's grandson back here, there wouldn't be another chance. The man tried to drag the boy to his feet, but he was displaying some unexpected resistance, allowing me to get up unnoticed. I grasped the rock the man had just beat me over the head with. Now it's my turn. Right in the dick, because everyone seems super cool with just hitting each other in the dick all the time. The rock should be able to supplement what meager strength I had left, adding more than enough power to my attack. My fist, still wrapped around the rock, dug into the side of the man's torso. It seemed like I hurt him quite a bit. Man rolled around for a bit, clutching his side. Freed from the man's grip, the boy hid behind me. Get out of here, dude. To the boy, those were the words he was waiting for the most. But the crisis was still not over. That was because even though he was clutching at my side, the man had gotten up again and taken a fighting stance. Take out your gun. You said you had a gun. Like, even just the threat of shooting him. Like, take it out. I could see in the man's eyes the resentment at the pain I had caused him, and the confidence that he could still beat me. If we were to clash head-on again, he mightn't even stop if my head were split open.
これ以上抵抗するな。おとなしく降参しろ。てめえこそ小僧をこっちへよこすんだ。首の骨をへし折られていか。誰が貴様の言いなりになどなるものか。もうじき応援が到着する。貴様らに逃げ場などない。
Man reacted adversely to the words reinforcements. That was because he now knew that arguing like this wasn't just a waste of time, but put him closer and closer to danger. Realizing that, the man shifted mental gears almost too quickly. The man pulled from his back pocket was of all things a gun. Now he has a gun. Take out your gun, honey. Of course, I'm a police officer. Not like I don't know what a gun is. Having one pointed at me was something I'd never experienced before. Was it real? Of course it was. No way he'd be a replica in a situation like this. As long as he still had that gun, no matter how much I yelled at him, I was at a distinct disadvantage. But I still had a fighting chance. If I were in his shoes, instead of wasting time yelling at each other like this, I would just shoot him and take the boy. That way he was the fastest, and would suppress any sort of further resistance from him. So he's wearing the stab-proof vest. Are we assuming that this is Kevlar? Is it going to be strong enough to stop a bullet? And that's if he gets shot in the body and not, say, like the head. The man was demanding my surrender without having fired a shot, meaning that he either didn't want to shoot or couldn't. In other words, the man in front of me was soft. If I could buy even just a little more time, the factors that would lead to my victory were numerous. Ooishi was probably on his way. He got choked out, so he's not. And the reinforcements we called for before were coming here and should already be on their way too. Not only that, they should have contacted the local police box. Without a doubt, somebody stationed in the village would be here much quicker than that. At that moment, I heard the rustling of foliage and heavy footsteps approaching. Ooishi was coming here, it was a whole new ballgame. Man couldn't have more than one gun. I don't think it's Ooishi. I thought that the time was on my side, but I failed to even imagine the enemy could also have reinforcements. Yep. You could tell the man who had just appeared was one of the perpetrators just by looking at him. The boy, sensitive to the impending danger, curled up behind my back. How could this be, damn it? As I backed up against a large tree while protecting the boy, second man also pulled out a gun.
2回しか言わんの。頭抱えてそこにうつ伏せになるんよ。
断る。
Bang! Bang! I shouted in protest. Blood erupted from my left shoulder. It took a few moments to register that I had been shot. Compared to the ones from the movies and TV dramas, the first actual gunshot I heard was simple and mundane. In fact, the sound was more akin to the small fireworks I used to buy from the corner store as a kid. There's no comparing the pain. There's a fear you knew only after you've been shot. The boy, in his confusion, tugged at my clothes, agitating the wound even further. Are you okay? As he sticks his finger in my bullet wounds. Are you okay, Mr. Akasaka? Wanted to put on a bold face and reassure him, but my voice was hoarse and had the opposite effect.
大丈夫。すでに応援は要請してあるんだ。すぐに警官隊が駆けつけてくれる。
警官が来る前、お前ん額にもパツくれちゃる方が早いんだ。無駄な接種をすなっちゅう本家に言われとんか加減した。
But the family also said to let the boy go, so I don't understand why we haven't done that.
あんまり舐めとんと。
They got the order. They said the Sonozaki family said to let the boy go, and they just decided not to do it. This was bad. It was very, very bad. The second man was a completely different beast than the first. He had no signs of indecisiveness or mercy. The man said he'd shoot, he'd shoot. He was somebody that a man like me could buy time from. I really hated to admit it, but at that moment, the image of Yuki's smiling face crossed the back of my mind. I knew what that meant. I was warning myself not to throw my life away over a matter of pride. Of course I didn't want to die here. I was just starting a new life with Yuki, and I wanted to see the face of our soon-to-be-born child. Why should I risk my life for some mistress grandson when I was at such a critical juncture in my own life? Ugh, damn it, damn it. I need to stop rambling at myself. So what do I do now? Take the boy and extend my own life? What a good idea. Everybody's life is precious. My own life was in danger. Nobody would blame me. Ugh, god damn it, it hurts, it hurts. If I'd known it'd be this painful, I wouldn't have played the tough guy. My biggest miscalculation, though, was that the sound of the gunshot was far quieter than I had imagined. If it was only that loud, it would be drowned out by the rain in the forest. It wasn't something that somebody far away could hear. Flee for my life or watch for... No, we're gonna watch for an opportunity. Oh, this is the bad one. Okay, so this gives us the... I guess these are the clues that tell us what we're supposed to be doing. So, I don't know. We'll plead for my life. Maybe that'll distract them.
待てよ、待ってくれよ。死にたくないよ。
なんこっちだって死なせとうない。分かればええん分かれば。
撃つなよ。
I think we put on like hint helpers at the beginning of the story because I didn't realize that we were gonna be making choices. Like, I'm not good at making choices. I'm terrible at them. So I think the green check should mean that that's what we're supposed to do.
帰りを待ってる妻がいるんだ。死にたくないんだよ。
叫ばんとでも歌んね。おとなしい頭抱えてうつ伏せになったら歌んだるね。
本当だろうな。本当だろうな。約束は守れよ。絶対だぞ。男と男の約束だぞ。
守ったの。男と男の約束しやよ。
守れよ。じゃあうつ伏せになるからな。なるからな。約束守るんだから。銃を向けるのやめろよ。やっぱ撃つ気なんだろ。撃つ気なんだろ。
He's like panicking.
俺が撃つつになったら後頭部を撃つ気なんだろ。
歌んね歌んね。わーったしまってる。銃はしまってる。
Put the gun away, and then we're gonna take out our gun.
どんぬこれなら文句ないんて。
Oh.
極めて文句ないですよ。
It was over in a flash. The moment he lowered his gun, Ooishi didn't let his chance slip by. Ooishi had been assessing the situation for quite some time from behind the two men. Since they had their guns trained on me, he didn't really have a chance to jump in. Seeing the look on Ooishi's face indicating that he wanted me to create an opening, took in that role completely. Oh, I see. So we saw Ooishi from the forest. That's why we did it. Okay. Ooishi forcefully lifted the arm that was holding the gun, then took the gun from the man's hand in only an instant. The other man, who was a bit slow in grasping what was happening, pointed his gun at them, but with his ally grappling with Ooishi, he couldn't pull the trigger. That man was the one that was wrestling with Ooishi at that moment. He might have shot without hesitation. But this man wouldn't shoot. He couldn't shoot. Ooishi kicked the other man away, and while aiming the stolen gun with his left hand, pulled out his own. With guns akimbo. What a very cool phrasing. He was aiming at both men at the same time. It was perfectly played. But heedless of the guns pointed at them, the men shouted, "Scram!" as they scattered away at full speed. It's over in an instant. The two running away without putting up a fight was honestly unexpected. Ooishi, quietly clicking his tongue in admonishment, slipped both guns into his pants pockets.
あいつらもよく知ってるな。
何をですか？
逃げてる背中を警官は撃てませんからね。私も退職金が惜しいもんで。
Ooishi and I grinned at each other.
君が犬飼俊樹君？犬飼検察大臣のお孫さん？
はい。
これはでかい事件になるかな。どうせトカゲの尻尾切りになるんでしょうけどね。
Ooishi smiled amusedly. The fact that the Onigafuchi Defense Alliance, or rather the Sonozaki family behind them, was pulling the strings was apparent, but proving it wouldn't be easy. With apologies to Ooishi, the incident was unlikely to go public. If this caused an uproar, it would obviously lead to the minister losing his office. With HQ having decided that doing so was in the natural interest, this would probably be cleaned up quietly. Might be a rough way of saying it, but this was born in the shadows and was going to die in the shadows. Ooishi probably already understood the implications behind this incident.
とにかく非常線を張らせましょう。連中まだ一丁は拳銃を持ってるようですからね。それから犬飼君を保護して赤坂さんはすぐに病院に行かないと。
Get me to the hospital now. I have a bullet wound in my arm. As the tension in the situation faded, the pain from the gunshot wound in my shoulder blossomed once again. My forehead was also stinging painfully and had grown hot enough to start a fire. Thinking that the tension had caused me to sweat, right my forehead, but what came off was a large amount of blood. I realized that my shirt had been stained crimson from the blood flowing from my head. I turned around. Hoi was safe and sound, without a doubt. There would probably be an investigation on the men who ran, but that was for another day. At this point in time, I could safely say we had cleared the major hurdle of securing the boy's safety. As soon as I recognized that, I felt like the lights in my head had been hit by a power failure. My knees buckled from underneath me, and the ground there, feeling as soft as a cloud, didn't feel unpleasant even as I was covered in the rain-soaked mud. Ooishi came closer, asking if I was okay, but somehow I couldn't tell. I turned off the switch to the last light in my head. Exhaustion enveloped me. Sleep. Something softer than any blanket wrapped around me. Damn, that was a long chapter. Hour and a half, and we still haven't even looked at the tips yet. Whew. Alright. So, at least we found the kid, right? New tips? Oh, we only have one this time. A very kind person. Yeah, achievement unlocked, mission accomplished. It does seem confusing that the kidnappers knew that they were supposed to release the boy and they just didn't. I guess they, thought that their leverage was too good, that they didn't want to give it up. Patients admitted to the hospital can only accept calls at fixed times. That's why she wouldn't be receiving a call from him today. Oh, maybe we're talking about Yuki. Yesterday she had teased him that he got lonely easily, so he might have struggled with the idea of calling her sooner. It was much easier to imagine rather than he might just be too busy to call. Because he's just that type of person. Yuki, whispering that, smiled to herself. The announcement that visiting hours were over played over the hospital intercom along with some music. She exchanged pleasantries with the family of the patient that was staying in the same room as her. Probably eager for his mother to be discharged, their small child was wearing a beaming smile. That child's mother was pregnant in the bed next to mine with, well, maybe their new brother or sister. They were probably ready to burst with the expectations, dreams, and worries of having a new sibling. The joys of a growing family. Bathing in those warm feelings, I stroked my own belly, which had grown quite large. I had talked with him about how many children we wanted to have. Talked about how if we had 3, it would certainly be lively. However, there was the inescapable worry of whether I'd be able to handle giving birth that many times.
でもそんなことを不安に思って出産を嫌う母なんていないですものね。
Yuki, smiling as she said that to herself, gently stroked her stomach. The Metropolitan Public Safety Division. Place where that man's sense of justice had led him. That person was actually a very gentle, very fragile person. He didn't talk much about the specifics, but I didn't think he was suited for the assignment he was on right now. But, as long as he said he was going to try his best, I would watch over him warmly.
あなたのお父さんはね、とっても頑張り屋さんなのよ。くちょこちょこちょこちょ。
Yuki seemed to be enjoying herself as she talked to her own belly. At that moment, Yuki suddenly became concerned about something and looked out the window. It used to be this time, long ago. She remembered that when she was little, around this time in the countryside where her grandmother lived, the Higurashi would fill the air with their chorus. The Higurashi would cry. This was in the middle of Tokyo. Unlike in the countryside, you couldn't hear the song of the Higurashi. But for some reason, at that moment, Yuki felt that she wanted to hear that song. It's an interesting tip. Not really sure how that helped us at all, but okay. All right, so let's save here for today. So this is the end of our 4th chapter. Cool. And then the next one, I guess we're going to kind of see the aftermath, like, you know, what's going to... I mean, we got to be wrapping up this story soon. We've been looking the entire time for the minister's grandson. We found him. Maybe we'll do like a little bit more investigating on the kidnappers, but I can't imagine there's a lot left of this particular story. Anyway, I appreciate y'all tuning in. I will have some more Higurashi up when I can. I'm also playing Smile for Me this week, which is like a cool little indie storytelling game. Click and solve puzzles that I'm really enjoying, so check that out too if you're interested. But I appreciate y'all tuning in, and I will catch you for the next one. Peace.